Right, good evening and welcome to Rushcliffe Borough Council's Corporate Overview Group meeting. As always, I'd like to remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. A recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the Council's YouTube channel. In addition, under the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information, England, Regulations 2012, other people may film, record, tweet, or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the Council's control. May I remind councillors to please switch your microphones off when you are not speaking. And could I also ask that everybody's got their telephones on silent? Thank you. I'd now like to move to item 1, which is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Gowland this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. So we go to item 3, minutes of the meeting of the 14th of June 2023. I'm not going to go through them page by page, but has anybody anything they wish to comment on, or any errors or omissions? Could I have somebody to propose them then? Councillor Edavine, second. Councillor Walker. Thank you. I'll sign those at the end, Tracy. Right, we move to item 4, which is our health and safety annual report, and that I believe is being presented by Jo Wilkinson. Thank you, Jo.
Thank you and good evening. I'd just like to do a quick summary of the key points within the annual health and safety report, which covers the financial year 2022 to 2023. The first area to highlight is under section 2.0, which is around the changes to the risk profile from a health and safety point of view. This has come about due to the following factors. So streetwise services came back in-house in September 22, which resulted in an increase in the establishment headcount from 259 employees up to 312 employees, and sees the council now providing a more higher risk service. Also, we had Bingham Arena open its doors to the public in February 2023. This resulted in a significant health and safety work for the contract and the project management team during the development phase. And finally, Rushcliffe Oaks was officially open for services on the 3rd of April 2023, which required regular health and safety input and support to ensure its successful opening. Obviously, we've got the running of the electric-powered cremator, which is an obvious risk on the new site. But in addition to this, we have 9 acres of memorial grounds which are being maintained. Under section 4, talks about the key activities that have been completed within the year. We've had ongoing policy review work, which continues with just the lone worker policy requiring a review this year. I've also listed in 4.2 the policies that are due for update in the current year, 2023 to 24. One of the health and safety objectives for the 12-month period was to carry out health and safety audit of Streetwise prior to coming back in-house on the 1st of September. This was completed, and the audit enabled the council to understand the priorities following the Streetwise transfer and resulted in a comprehensive action plan and work programme being developed and implemented. There was training delivered across the council, which was detailed in 4.4 of the report. Previously, the Corporate Overview Group has been keen to see improvements on the percentage of staff that have undergone the training. And a lot of work has been done on this over the year, with training levels now ranging from around 80% up to 94% in most of the courses. The only exception being the display screen equipment e-learning course, which has the lowest completion rate currently. Work's being done on that to move it over to what we call a certification. That means that staff are automatically re-enrolled over a time frame. So you set that for 2 years, 3 years, depending on what you want. And then staff and managers are sent email reminders automatically through the system, so that when their training is due for completion, it ensures that that quicker. And that's what's happened with the other e-learning packages that have now seen that increase in completion rates. So it's aimed that will be the priority for this year. Workplace health remains a priority with a number of promotional activities for staff across the site, and they were listed in 4.12 of the report. At its meeting in September 2022, Corporate Overview Group supported a number of health and safety goals, of which all of these were completed with the exception of the one e-learning course that didn't go on to certification, which I haven't talked you through. Coming on to health and safety performance, accident numbers remain low for the council. There was an increase this year to 26 accident forms completed, but bearing in mind that this did include the streetwide data from the 1st of September, the number of employee days lost due to an accident at work remained very low at 19 days, with only 4 accidents resulting in time off from work, details of which are in section 6.8 of the report. Only one of the accidents met the criteria for reporting to the HSE, to the Health and Safety Executive, under the RIDDOR regulations. Finally, that brings me on to looking at the objectives that have been set for this current year, and they are to review and update the policies that are over 3 years old, and they're listed in 3.2 of the report, to carry out health and safety compliance audits across the whole of the authority, to continue to support health and safety compliance with the streetwise teams, health and safety inspection at Rushcliffe Oaks, to improve on the e-learning completion rates for the DSE e-learning by moving that over to the certification, and to continue to deliver the workplace health initiatives in line with employee needs. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions or they would like to put to Councillor Plant?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a paper copy. It's on the health and safety audits, paragraph 4.3, and it's about the streetwise. And obviously, it's not the audit findings demonstrated that managers were generally aware of their role and duties under the relevant health and safety legislation. It's not written very positively, obviously. And again, as you just said, they obviously continue to support that is one of the objectives at the end of the and the conclusion at the end of the report. So I'm just wondering how soon will that sort of follow-up happen in terms of streetwise and obviously the issues that have been raised in that paragraph. Thank you.
Yeah, so generally the findings were reasonable with respect to the audit. We had Bolsover Council, who's external to us, who came in to do that, so it was quite an outsider's view, quite objective from that point of view. And we did have meetings that took place with the managers and the employees on the ground, so we did cover everybody within that audit. I think just to clarify some of the areas that we wanted to improve on was the documentation side of things. They had a lot of health and safety documentation, so it's not like it wasn't in place, but it was unclear on what policy versions they were on, so it wasn't always clear when you spoke to one manager and another one as to which documentation they were working to. So if anything, they had too much and it was too complicated. So we have, as I say, put in place a good programme working with the new lead specialists within the streetwise service area to do a number of things. It's to build the managers' confidence now they're under Rushcliffe policies and procedures. So making sure that they're familiar with the council policies, but also making sure that we're concentrating on their internal procedures and clarifying what current procedures are the up-to-date ones, so that we're getting rid of the duplication and the confusion that was picked up through the audit. I think with a lot of training, both the managers but also frontline staff. So we've implemented regular monthly toolbox talks now to make sure that all the risk areas within Streetwise are covered on a monthly basis, so that we're looking at different things, be it manual handling, hand-on vibration, working with tools, accident reporting, all of those areas. So we've got, and it's not to say that things weren't being done previously. It was just that we felt, and the audit brought up, that there was just some confusion along the way, and it's just clarifying now, and especially got an opportunity to bring them under Rushcliffe's wing and make sure that we're well proceeded. So I don't know, hopefully that answers the question.
Councillor Way, on your report about accidents for members of the public in the visiting council sites, you referenced further down about something about play parks. Do these figures include people who go to play parks? And do you have any responsibility or any figures for play parks that are on open space areas in new estates?
So yeah, the figures do include information on play parks. Realistically, we only tend to get to hear about ones that take place at Rushcliffe Country Park, because that's where we've got the rangers on site, and it's a manned site, not all the time. We will only find out about accidents at some of the other sites where it's serious enough for somebody to feel it's necessary to report it. So whereas when you look at accident figures to our employees, we recommend any accident to be reported to us, because we'd obviously want to pick up on trends, and it might only be a slight cut or a bruise, but we want to know that, because next time it might be something more serious. Whereas a member of the public realistically is only going to advise us if it's something significant that has caused them concern, and that comes through the customer services centre, so they will either report it online or via a telephone call. But it does include those ones. Generally, we'll get more accidents than I've put in here, because we get a lot of reporting at Country Park around somebody who's fell off the bike, or there's a football accident at one of our sites and it's a bad tackle or something like that. So we're only interested in the ones that we've got some control over. So if there was a problem with the surface area that's caused the accident, for example, then that would be reported. But we record all the others just so that we've got that information if we get that information provided to us. But it wouldn't necessarily sit within these figures, which is probably why they're a lot lower than probably you're anticipating. Yeah.
Can I just ask one question? Do we give CPR and defibrillator training?
We have done in the past. It's something that when we a number of things, when we've implemented new defibs, we'll do. They tend to come with a free training, so we'll do it at that point in time. So we have done, and it's something that we do look at refresher training on sites where it's necessary. For example, at the arena, we're very fortunate in when the office is open, the leisure centre is open, and they do CPR and defib training frequently. So I don't know whether it's monthly, every couple of months, the lifeguards are constantly doing defib, and so we made the decision to utilise them and their skills rather than thinking about training our own staff in it. But staff that attend our facilities sites, for example, have got defib training, but they're not necessarily always going to be at those sites where the defibs are. I think we rely on, for example, at Gresham, we would rely on the sports teams that are using the sites to have their volunteers or their groups trained in it as well. And they're very self-explanatory, but having the training does give you that confidence to be able to use them.
And I'm assuming that there are location maps or something which tells people where the defib is within those areas.
Yeah, so we've got notices on the site, but also we've got them logged on, and I can't remember what the site is, but it's the it's like the East Midlands Ambulance Service site. I'd have to look it up and tell you the exact, but there's a national database, so that and it's even used for the ambulance service, because sometimes they haven't got a defib on site, so they know, and they know whether it's a 24/7 accessible one or whether it's got restrictions on access.
Thank you. Anybody else have it? Councillor Walker.
A couple of comments really rather than questions, Chair. So, thinking specifically about the recommendations and Part C and Part D, it seems to me from the report and the presentation that we've had so far that yes, significant and very good progress made against the goals that were set last year, and I think the people involved should be congratulated for that. And similarly, the proposed objectives that for the next year seem eminently sensible from as far as I could see. But generally, I think it's a positive, good report, and the people that have been involved with them have done good work in this area.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Well, that actually leads me on to the recommendations. We were asked to consider the information contained in the report, which we have done, and note the changes to the health and safety risk profile as a result of both Streetwise coming in back in-house, the opening of Rushcliffe Oaks, as was mentioned, and now with the comments that Councillor Walker has made. All those in favour of those recommendations? Thank you. So that motion therefore is carried. That leads us on to item 5, the finance and performance report, which I believe is down to Katie and Ed. Ladies first.
Okay, thank you everybody. So I'm going to do the finance part of the report. So this outlines the Q1 position in terms of financial and performance monitoring for 23-24. So in terms of our revenue spend, we're projecting a full year underspend of 0.55 million. Table 1 in the report shows you the main under and overspends in relation to this. Most notably, the efficiency comes from the favourable position of the business rates. So this is both a reduction in the levy payment and an increase in the pooled funds. In total, that's 1.2 million. Offsetting this is overspends due to a property legal claim and the need for Streetwise to hire vehicles. Other smaller overspends, the crematorium, this is due to the income target being set to the 60 cremations per month from the outset, rather than these being phased for growth. The underspend is earmarked for cost pressures, which continue to be the pay award and inflation. You can see this in Appendix A, along with the revenue monitoring statement by service area. Appendix E shows the Q1 special expense position, which is expected to be overspent by 6,500. This is mostly due to costs which were incurred from a traveller encampment earlier in the year. Capital is projecting a full year underspend of 6.457 million. Mainly this is due to 2.723 million registered housing providers, 1 million for the Gypsy and Traveller site acquisition, and 0.783 for crematorium contingency that's no longer required. Full information on all the variances is in appendices C and D. Other underspends in capital include Bingham Leisure Hub, which was 0.563 million of contingencies, 0.5 million for the Ed Walton Community Facility. We expect this now to slip into 24-25. There's a planning application going to committee this month. In addition, 0.48 million for West Park and Sir Julian Kahn Pavilion expense. This is now because they're going to be doing essential works only, and a cabinet report's due in early autumn for the strategic vision for that site. We're due to receive 7 million in capital receipts, and any borrowing will be internal, so there's no requirement to externally borrow. Just to update on key pressures, the staff pay award has obviously been agreed at 2125, and that's now been paid. This costs the council around 0.394 million. Obviously, we were aware of this pressure last year, and we assigned 0.2 million of the carry forwards from 22-23 to cover this, and the rest is being covered by in-year contingency. Inflation continues to impact on contracts, and obviously is being closely monitored, but it is falling. It was 6.8% in July, which is quite a lot lower than the peak of 11.1 we saw last October. These pressures can have a knock-on effect on our collection rates for council tax, business rates, also fees and charges and sundry debtors. Paragraph 4.11 gives you the details on this and raises no current concerns, but we do continually monitor this closely throughout the year. The three most significant targets in the transformation programme is the crematorium, Parkwood, which is the leisure contract, and planning agreements. At Q1, the target was savings of 0.155 million. We've realised 0.074 of this, and that's mainly due to the crematorium income, which we've already talked about. The pooled funds, which are the multi-asset investments. In the report, it tells you that the current value is 13.699 million, which is a 1.3 million loss against the original investment. We have had an updated set of figures on that, and as at the end of July, it was 13.776, so it's improved by 12k since the last update given this report. We have got 0.973 million held in reserves to smooth this, and there'll be another 0.2 million added in year, so we'll have 1.173 million set aside for this. Obviously, although that's gone down, it's the returns from the investments give us 65 on the interest, give us 65% of the council's overall return on investments. In conclusion, the overall position is positive. We're projecting underspends for both capital and revenue. We've got no requirement to externally borrow. The key risks are pay and inflation. Pay awards have been higher than expected for the past 2 years due to the cost of living, and obviously this has a knock-on effect to future year budgets. But we've got earmarks. We're earmarking the underspends to support this. Uncertainty is also one of the risks due to the general election that will be taking place. The changes to legislation have been pushed back, and it's unlikely that we'll see any of these till 25-26. So obviously we've got the uncertainty about future funding, and also delays to bills such as the environmental bill make decision making more difficult. In terms of recommendations, we recommend that the group scrutinises the expected revenue budget efficiency for the year of 0.55 million and proposals to earmark this for cost pressures, which is in paragraph 4.1. The capital budget efficiencies of 6.457 million and the expected outturn position for the special expenses, which is 6.5 thousand over budget. and identifying any exceptions to judge whether any further information is required.
Thank you,
Perhaps
Katie. for
take any
that.
questions?
Thank you very much. Members, Councillor Plant.
I am new, so I've got lots of questions.
That's all right.
First of all, yeah, thank you for that sort of resume. I'm looking at paragraph 47, first of all, on the Gypsy and Traveller site acquisition. Now, obviously, it was the same day as Lark in the Park, I think. Oh, Promising Park, I think it was one of them. When obviously the travellers arrived the night before. I mean, I say, I haven't been on the Borough Council for 4 years, but I was on it quite a few years before. And we were talking about a traveller's site. We have been talking about a traveller's site for many, many, many years. So I'm a little bit unclear in terms of where we are with that. I mean, that one night visitation incurred £4,500, which has been taken out of the special expenses, which could have been used, I'm sure, for something much more worthwhile than that. And then it says on one of them that a grant application was made for this is for the traveller site acquisition, and it wasn't totaling 1.9 million, whatever, with 50,000. Anyway, the grant was not approved, and there's 1 million removed pen. Anyway, I can't understand that part. But is there any money there for it? Is basically the question I'm asking. And I mean, to be fair, to some extent, getting the money is the easy thing. It's obviously then it's where the site is. So I'm just wondering where we are with that in the grand scheme of things. And again, I mean, that will, I think, well, practically every year we certainly have travellers at some part of West Bridgeford, certainly, and probably other parts of Rushcliffe. So I just think I'd like to sort of, where we are and how that will move forward, really. Thank you. I've got something else, Bob.
Okay, I can share my understanding on that with you. So this was in the budget last year, and we had 2 million. So we were supposed to get some fund. Well, sorry, not supposed to, but we were trying to get some funding for it, and then that would be matched. So that was unsuccessful. So we've still got money in the programme. What we're saying at the minute is it's unlikely that we'll spend it this year because 2 factors: struggling to get the funding, but also to find the appropriate land, as you mentioned there. So there was this was included in the capital appraisals, and I think the commitment, I did note it down actually, so let me find it. The commitment is by we need 30 provision for 13 by 2038 and 7 of those by 2025. So we're still hoping to meet that, but there's no further updates in terms of any available funding or a location that I'm aware of at the minute.
Do we know, are there any sites at present within, say, any other part of Nottinghamshire or close by or anything actually up and running?
I'm not aware of those. I'd need to get some information probably from the planning team and see if they have. I know there was an assessment report done, which is where the drive came to get more, more provision for it. So there are sites around Nottinghamshire, but particularly in Rushcliffe. That those numbers are just for the Rushcliffe area that we need to find accommodation for those.
Yes. Did you say you had a? All right, Councillor Edwin.
It's probably trying to fill in a bit of background to the traveller site, because I think there is a difference between travellers turning up in West Bridgeford and then actually having sites, because the sites are supposed to be a permanent site where travellers can be, and within local plan part 2 there's certainly one at Fareham, and I think this came up because certainly last year the council felt that they were vulnerable if they didn't have a plan for their own site over and above any sites that may be included in strategic housing sites. And so that was, so basically, if you look at somewhere like Screveton where there's a illegal traveller site, if they go to appeal, they're more likely to win it if we don't have a site that we can offer ourselves. and that's the issue, I think. So it's a bit of a difference between ad hoc travellers turning up
Mm.
and actually having provision for travellers that we can say that are permanent, yeah, if that helps.
Okay, can I just come back on that? I can see, well, thank you for that, but the thing again with the travellers that come every year, they are in transit. They actually don't want a permanent site. So, you know, really, it is perhaps looking at a transit site that will actually solve the issue that we have because they're on the way somewhere else. Sorry, that's my view.
Can't answer that one.
I'm not actually sure that, I think this discussion is probably for another forum. Yeah, because it's the finance that we're looking at this minute, but it very interesting comments there. And I think, yes, maybe we should be discussing them elsewhere. I think Councillor Walker has something to say.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification, really. I saw reference to about £33,000 variation in commercial income, which doesn't quite tally with the later on. We're saying we're 100% on pay. My page numbers are different, sorry, but in Ed's bit, we talk about 100% occupancy. So are there vacancies at the point, or have they subsequently been filled, meaning we're now 100% vacant, but because they were because there was a period of occupancy, that's driven the fall in rental income?
So the 33k that we referred to there, that is mostly due to the point. My awareness on that is that we've got one suite that is vacant at the point, and that talks are in progress to let that out. But even if we do so during the year, that's still in a period where it's vacant. So in which case we're projecting for a loss of income in year.
So that 33 grand is just for the vacant period that you're expecting.
It's actually 20 for the point for the vacant period, Jen, and there's some other minor ones. We have just done also a rent review, which isn't included in the budgeted figures. So actually, when we come to report this in Q2, that variance may come down a little bit as well, because that will help to offset the increases in others, will help to offset the vacant period at the point.
I have to say, I'm slightly confused, because are we actually saying that the two reports span different periods of time then? Because either they're fully occupied or they aren't, and therefore the income's not correct.
So on page 59, the bottom line, Lydeg 41. Sorry, Lydeg 40. 100% occupancy.
That's industrial units, not offices.
My understanding excited for occupancy is in relation to officers' posts. So as stated, it's industrial units.
You're giving us a thumbs up. Does that mean you're?
Yeah, so I understand that they classify office office use different to industrial. There's probably another line somewhere that they haven't reported on that gives the office occupancy data. So I thought that industrial included all commercial property, obviously it doesn't.
Right. Okay, so that clarifies that. Councillor Edderby.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the question. You referred to the drop in the asset value or the pooled assets valuation, and it's obviously that's a sort of significant drop. Is it something that we should be worried about?
Not at this stage, no. Obviously, it's a long-term investment, so it forms part of the whole treasury management strategy that's approved by full council. So, you know, we do expect that they drop as well as rise, and obviously, it's the effect of the difficult, you know, period that we're going through financially. Obviously, it's encouraging that it has just increased, even in the time between writing this report and the latest data that we've got. We have set aside the reserves to cover it should we need to, and actually there is in the Treasury Management Guidance there is a statutory override that's been extended to April 2025, so we don't have to have that reserve, but we see it as prudent to do so to make sure we're covered, so we're not worried about that position.
Thank you. My question was just about the target for Rushcliffe Oaks, where it's got a target for 60 cremations per month, and then June it's at to 36. I was just wondering if for why that is and why initially we thought 60, but also kind of is there scope that could be reviewed and maybe a bit over optimistic that 60 a month could have been achievable, or is it actually that kind of just trying to build the business, and actually we could have actually started low, or what? I don't know, but I'm just wondering why what can we do?
Yeah, I mean, as we've put there, it's the business case was overly optimistic. Just got the latest figures for August, and there was 38 in August, which would be a quiet month. Obviously, winter months tend to unfortunately be a little more busy. It's encouraging the performance at the crematorium that we're actually, you know, encouraging business from outside the area. So there's not any concerns that we will start to reach those levels. It was just overly optimistic, really, and you know, has caused that drop just for this year.
So kind of as a KPI for Rushcliffe Oaks, is that going to kind of be reviewed on what a monthly goal would be? Because if it's August is only 38 and we're still looking at 60, that's quite a lot of money to get up to 60.
It is, yeah, and obviously, you know, it's a new venture, so you know, these things were done on advice in the business case. Things are always reviewed. Obviously, we keep updating the projections each month based on where we're at. It is still expected that we will grow and that 60 is achievable. You know, that's not full capacity, as it were, but yeah, we're still hoping to reach those levels. It's just going to take more time.
Well, you were really just putting information that we looked at this in detail at the last Growth and Development Scrutiny Committee. So you members with interest in this may find the committee report to that interesting, or that, you know, happy to speak with people. I'm sure Councillor Way the same, happy to speak with people after the meeting or away from it, but yeah, we covered it in detail then.
Have you got further questions?
Yes, sorry, yes, very well. It's on the paragraph 47. It's the projected outturn is 10.267 million, and the underspent 6.457 million. But my question is that primarily this arises from, and there is 2.723 million for the provision for support for registered housing providers. Meetings are taking place with registered providers, developers and housing to explore opportunities to commit the provision. But it seems to be taken that will be an underspend. I mean, you're saying that, you know, the underspend will include that. Well, we're only first quarter of the year, so I'm just wondering. So one, what will that money be used for, and two, will it be used?
This is an item that attracts a lot of attention every time, because it's a big amount of money. So these are Section 106 monies that we hold to create affordable housing. So I can only give you the bit I know, because obviously I've got the finance figures, but the actual mechanics that goes on behind this is, you know, that we are keen to do that. It's difficult to again obtain the land to do that, and people to do it. So these meetings are taking place, and obviously everybody's very keen to get this underway. If you did want further information, we can ask for somebody from planning to come along and talk about this in more detail at another meeting. But obviously at the minute we can only update that, you know, the monies are there and they are keen to be spent, but it is more difficult to, you know, attract the commitment to get this underway. And it's not just an us problem, it's a global problem as well.
Do we have any training which will cover that aspect coming up?
I'll find you a date, unless Tracy knows off the top of the head, but there's certainly a Section 106 and SIL training session coming up, and I think it's the middle of October.
That's what I thought. And of course, we have got this training on Thursday, which will hopefully throw some light onto government financing. So we'll maybe understand a little more at that. But yes, I think.
Isn't there a scrutiny item on affordable or social housing or both? So would that not come?
Wouldn't come into that, certainly,
as part of that as well.
It's under scrutiny. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And is that's all your questions?
Yes.
Okay. So now we move on to Ed's report.
Thank you. Yeah, just moving on to performance, giving Chair and Councillors. Refer to Appendix G. We begin with the 4 performance exceptions on the strategic scorecard. First, the value of savings achieved by the transformation strategy. We've just covered Rushcliffe Oaks, so I think allowing for growth of the new service. I hope that was sufficient insight of what we've just covered. But otherwise, streetwide vehicle hire costs are above budget, and the spend on the councillors' community grant scheme is currently projected to exceed the target saving of 20,000. Although this may change by the end of the year depending on demand. Whilst the target is unlikely to be met this year, efficiencies in other areas ensure expenditures on track, and the budget should not be exceeded. Moving on to the percentage of household waste sent for reuse, recycling and composting, the figure is below target due to reduced garden waste tonnage. Whilst last year was also low due to the extremely dry weather, this year has seen less grain waste collected due to wet weather conditions, and this week is the anomaly in our weather of the last few days. But it's restricted gardening activity, which is why we've had that reduced garden waste tonnage. On the percentage usage of community facilities, figures at Sir Julian Khan, Gampston, West Park Sports Pavilion remain strong. Further marketing continues on our channels to drive occupancy of lower figures here at Rushcliffe Arena and Committee Rooms 1 and 2. They've had some seasonal effects of late. Usage figures for the arena are based upon spaces booked currently between 8 AM and 10 PM, 7 days a week. As you can imagine, there's demand is much lower at weekends and past certain times on weekdays. Therefore, for all venues, we're assessing the metrics around this going forward to include peak meeting times. So going forward, we should have more accurate reporting figures rather than the existing figures, which are based on 14 hours a day. Switching over now to the number of affordable homes delivered, the targets are anticipated to be met, but the current mark is down due to the progress of overall housing delivery by developers on key sites being slow, and affordable housing units are backloaded for delivery towards the end of the year. We're now looking at the 5 exceptions on the operational scorecard, starting with the percentage of planning enforcement inspections carried out in target time. Performance on the processing is steadily improving month on month. 3 new members of staff joined the team in mid-July, so it's now fully staffed. Further improvements in performance are expected in Q2. And then for the planning enforcement inspections carried out in target time, the target is based on all cases needing to be visited next working day. It doesn't reflect the new tiered approach outlined in our enforcement policy. So the reporting system does need to be updated to enable monitoring. And the figures that aren't highlighted in this report, I understand, saw a 93.8% inspection rate for this quarter. But as we said before, we'll look at changing those metrics to make sure that the reporting is more accurate. On the percentage of calls, customer services answers in 60 seconds. Q1 is always the busiest time of the year due to annual billing and garden waste renewals. Calls are higher, performance targets are profiled to take this into account. Demand also alters according to circumstances. I know I've seen it firsthand, council tax payments being restructured slightly in response to cost of living. And that means that there's more complex, excuse me, more lengthy calls to take. And so even though we've got a very stretching target by industry standards, rotors working times are flexed to respond to demand. And in performance is expected to improve as the year progresses. And that does tend to happen year on year. Cumulative number of fly tipping cases now for this quarter is 214 against a target of 195. Performance has improved compared to the same quarter last year. Targets are stretching, and I think it's put in context a bit in terms of how high they are when we recently topped a DEFRA league table for the most fixed penalty notices per incident in the region in 21-22. This is in tandem with educating the public to only use licensed waste carriers. That's obviously an ongoing key message that we continue to put out. And then finally, just on the income generated from parks, pitches and open spaces, the current target budget profile is stretching as it includes pro rata income for football bookings, which will not commence until the season kicks into full flow later this month. Taking the normal summer profile of bookings, the volume has increased compared to previous years. Officers are confident the performance in this area will continue to improve. Is there anywhere you'd like to start the discussion?
Thank you very much. Well, I think as we recognise that the green waste collections, yes, are going to be dependent upon the seasons, and I suspect, given the amount of rain we've had over this year, the volume of prunings is going to be enormous. So I suspect that will be going up again. Community facilities is highlighted as well, but that is coming up for scrutiny. So that will be looked at anyway. And household planning applications, well, yes, we've got a raft of new staff, so hopefully something should be happening there. Does anyone have any questions?
Percentage of community, the use of community facilities, as you say, it's coming up on the scrutiny.
Yep.
You didn't mention anything with Bingham Marina, with the new community hall there. Is that included in these figures? And if it includes, should they be included for scrutiny as well?
Managed under external contracts, they wouldn't necessarily be included in these figures in terms of the sites that we directly own, because they're managed obviously in Lex Leisure or Parkwood's case, but we can going forward absolutely include them for comparison.
Yeah, I think it would be useful to kind of first, because it's kind of not seen as being a Lex Leisure kind of thing. It's seen as a borough council building, and how people go and book and stuff like that. I was just on a couple of other ones. The where was it? The fly tipping. Just wanting to kind of explain with how that target is come about and with the the value. I know it does look bad because the value is higher than the target. Is that because potentially people are reporting more flattings, so we're knowing more about it, and that we're more active? So is it, I don't know if it can be said as a kind of a good thing and a bad thing at the same time, because there's the amount of fly tipping that's then going on, but it is getting reported, so we're knowing about it, it's being dealt with promptly, and like with WISE are going out and carrying in inspections and investigations. How does that how do we look at that one? And then there's just another one.
No problem. Yeah, it's a combination of things. It's certainly over time we've had more high profile cases. For example, just the headlines you might have seen recently about these latest figures of being the best per incident in the East Midlands for 21-22. So there's definitely a profile thing, and that people know if you report fly tipping, there's a better chance that it's going to get investigated as fully as possible. And that's because over a number of years building the partnership with WISE, they obviously know the patch now, first of all, and also secondly, they've shown over a period of time they're very effective in terms of when the investigations come in. So that's why the figures are that much higher, is that we've got the resource that we've put to one side to make it a priority to look into them. But also, yeah, there's more confidence, I say, in terms of if you report fly tipping, that leads to potentially fines or prosecution.
Yes, certainly.
It was to do with the income generated from the parks, pitches and open spaces. You said about with Gresham, for instance, and West Park, which there's the new cricket square and that kind of thing put there. Just using that as an example, is that kind of being put out to clubs in order to use locally, and how they can book it? And I know it's been advertised through the social media channels through the council, but as a kind of directly with Not CC gone out to clubs to make them aware of that. In that instance, is that kind of thing with like Gresham and as well kind of put out to local clubs just to kind of boost. But with the income generated from the parks and open spaces, is that kind of just the ones in West Bridgford and the Rushcliffe Country Park? What kind of income like generates from those? Is it just events, or is there anything else that's kind of scoping for the use of the open space?
And to answer the first point, yes. So I know that our community development team, BSU team, actively promote West Park, for example, as a cricket venue, and have got a database of contacts where it would go to push out. So as much as, like you say, we have an overarching marketing campaign that will go on our channels, they've also got database of clubs and areas, and it goes to. I probably need to have a check exactly how lengthy that is, but certainly I know it goes out to those that they're most likely to hit, for new business for there. In terms of where the investment goes or the revenue goes, is that your point in terms of what we receive, you mean?
It was more like how we generate the income from parks and the open spaces, like with like in the park and proms in the park and that kind of thing. Is that where anything that gets generated from there go into it, or is it something else that I quite not understand how it's used?
Katie's maybe a better place.
So we have, in terms of the open spaces, so that would include things like the croquet lawn, where we've got the farmers market and the other types of markets and that kind of thing. The events as such is part of the arts and events income rather than just the pitches. But then I think sometimes they have like things like triathlons and different things that might incorporate like the Hook and Rushcliffe Country Park. I know they've done things like 10k runs and that kind of thing. So it's generally that.
Thank you, Chair. My attention was drawn to the explanation around transformation strategy and young. Target of 41,000. Following negotiations, achieved a reduction of 23,000. What more can you tell us about that?
So I know Young is in the process of that transition from what it has been in previous times. I'd need to go into more detail. Katie, again,
I know,
sorry,
yeah,
yeah.
really.
Sorry.
I've not got the actual figures on me, but it kind of staggers. So our financial year and the agreement year are slightly different. So we've still got to honour agreements up to a certain point, and then when it's been renegotiated, it'll take place part in year, but then not part till there. But overall, when it comes around, we've actually, I think, achieved a little bit better than that as well. So it's just a timing issue. If that makes sense.
I'm off again. Enforcement of planning inspection and planning inspections. This does seem to be a problem for residents in particular, and certainly across the parishes. And I imagine the same applies for the urban areas. This, I believe, is not delivered by us. We go to an outside supplier. And I just wonder, firstly, I don't know who it is that delivers that. And as it is of concern, I'm just wondering if it should come forward to scrutiny.
Our enforcement is definitely in-house.
Right.
We have planning enforcement officers. I think there are currently 2 or 3. What Ed was referring to earlier on is a change in our policy for enforcement about how quickly we will look at certain things. So it allows us to use our resources much, much better, which has led to the very high figures that he was talking about earlier on, which are not reflected in the report because the current PI hasn't been updated yet to reflect the new policy.
Fine. Okay, that answers the question then. Thank you very much. So if we have no more questions, can I thank both Katie and Ed for their reports, interesting, and their answers were insightful. And you recited the recommendations for us. Is everybody in agreement with the recommendations? And Councillor Edovine is going to propose. Councillor Walker has seconded. Thank you. Thank you very much. You're free to leave, or if you want to sit and listen, you can with pleasure. It's amazing how everybody goes. Right. We now move on to item 6, which is the consideration of the scrutiny group work programme. And I believe we have Councillor Thomas with us. And as she is with us and has something she would like to present to us, I think perhaps it would be expedient if we brought that item forward, which allows us to discuss it. And then, like everybody else, you're free to go as well. Oh, you lift share. Right. Best laid plans and all that.
Bear with me, I'll get you sit there. Tracy just needs to get your card so she can get your card, flag you up. You're not going to be anybody else.
Right, now, I believe you're proposing an item on diversity. Perhaps you'd like to present it to us.
Yes, thank you. So this item is about councillor diversity recruitment and allowances, and it came about following the decision to increase the councillors' allowance this year by less than inflation. I have no issue with that for myself, but I'm aware that the allowance is important to others and has an impact on councillor recruitment. But this matrix isn't just about the amount of the allowance, really. It's about encouraging diversity of councillors and removing barriers to people standing as councillors, perhaps even providing more incentives for people to stand in terms of allowances and grants and so on. So one of the barriers is remuneration, but that could be made into a selling point as an additional source of income for people who are reliant perhaps on a patchwork of ad hoc or part-time employment, or who have caring responsibilities or are self-employed, or indeed people who are studying. So I'm suggesting scrutinising the allowances available to address particular circumstances and comparing ourselves with other councils in that respect. I do realise that our Democratic Services team already put a huge amount of effort into the area of councillor recruitment, particularly in the run-up to the elections. And this is not by any means intended to criticise or undermine the work that's done. And I also understand that there's already a mechanism considering the amount of allowances, but I think this topic is wider than that's just covered by that process for considering the allowances. The other thing I'd just like to say really is that item isn't motivated by party politics, because I do understand how hard all the political parties, work to address this themselves. So it's certainly not a party political point really that I'm trying to make. One route into being a councillor is through the parish and town councils, and in this respect, Rushcliffe councillor recruitment links to recruitment through town and parish councillors. And it does appear to me that fewer people are coming forward to stand for the parishes. Is there any data on this? Is there any data on how the age profile of these lower level councils are changing over time, and how that then impacts on the Rushcliffe? So the more diverse the parish and town councils are, it could lead to more diverse recruitment for Rushcliffe. And, you know, for all the political parties or people who aren't part of a political party, across the board really, as I say, this isn't a party political issue. I'd also like to argue that this is the right time in the 4-year cycle to look at this, because it takes time to grow councillors. And I think the closer it becomes to an election, the more of a party political issue it becomes. The further apart from the election it is, the more likelihood that people that can engage with the issues of diversity rather than seeing it as party political issue. So there.
Interesting question. But I don't know how the councillors feel. I'd be interested to hear what you have to say. You've already touched on the fact that it affects all parties or all people who wish to stand. But I'm not quite sure where that fits into the council and whether that is something that we should actually be scrutinising, or if it should actually be the political parties. What do the members think? That's Redevine.
I think it's a difficult question, and I don't actually disagree with what you're saying in terms of wanting to increase diversity, get more people interested, etc. I think I'm not sure how scrutiny could help that. That's the problem I'm having. So perhaps you could expand on that a bit. But you know, you did reference the fact that parish councils are often not fully subscribed, and it's difficult to recruit parish councillors sometimes. There's a sort of double-edged sword there. In small villages, they're quite happy to co-opt people sometimes, but in larger villages, they're not. And it's a little bit, you know, I suppose you could argue that I think at the last elections there was only one parish election of account. Obviously there is an election because they are elected unopposed. So I'm not. What I'm struggling with is how can scrutiny can sort of improve the processes, if you like, given that there are established processes which are run by the officers in order to try and recruit. And I'm just sort of, I'm not pouring cold water on your idea, because I think I'd like to see more people coming forward and getting more involved. But if they don't want to, they don't want to.
Councillor Plant.
Thank you. I think without a doubt there's questions that I would like to be answered here, which we haven't, in terms of childcare and allowances and things like that. So I think they're very valid questions. But I suppose to some extent I'm agreeing with what you're saying, that I personally think, as a member of the Labour Party, that it is very much our role to be working to get a diverse group who are interested in standing for council, and not wanting to put my party down in the fact, we'll forget about it until 6 months before the next one, and then and that is not the way to do it. It needs to be an ongoing. Are you interested? Yes. Or what can we provide in support and training, etc., etc., and certainly going out and asking for different age groups, different ethnic groups, and really encouraging them to do it. But I still think the questions here are valid, but I'm not sure what Rushcliffe can do about that bit. And that's my.
And as has been said, the allowances have just been reviewed. I take your point about it takes time for some of these things to filter through the processes, and maybe we should be flagging that up, that they need to be looked at a little earlier in time than rather at the last minute, if you see what I mean. But there is one thing I would actually like to say. I spoke to a councillor only yesterday, and I think we need to make it clear to our current councillors and anybody else who wishes to become a councillor about expenses. He didn't realise he could claim expenses. He had been told he couldn't, and I won't say where that information came from, but he'd been told he couldn't claim expenses. So I said to him, what do you mean you can't claim expenses? I said, we've got a form, you fill your form in, and you claim them every month. And he said he didn't realise that he could. And as he pointed out, yes, he's not on a mega pension, and he's obviously not working anymore. So I thought, well, at least we could maybe put a briefing note out, or some information, just to make sure that councillors are aware of what they can claim. Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, I think it's not just travel expenses, it's all the other grants that are available for caring and so on, and things that could be made available, and whether or not there's more of those that we could actually set up. And I think comparing ourselves with other councils and what they do is important. I think, and I take the point about political parties, but I think this point about setting the allowances and grants and all these sort of things that enable it at this end also need to be looked at from the council end.
There is a point about, yes, comparing with other councils. There are other councils that are, yes, they seem to give away rather a lot of money, but they also seem to have some financial difficulties. I don't know whether there is any room for us to look at
timing of meetings as well, and whether or not more meetings can be held virtually. Those sorts of issues would all come into it as well. I know that statutory wise we can't. There's many meetings we can't hold virtually or in a hybrid form, but there are probably quite a lot that we do have that we could hold, and it's looking at the whole piece really. Yeah,
I think virtual meetings came up as part of the review into how things had worked during COVID, didn't they? And as to whether we thought that virtual meetings were more productive than face-to-face, or whether we should have hybrids, and I think we are to some extent trying to have certain hybrid meetings. So I think that's probably addressed. As has been said, I can't see that we would gain a lot from scrutiny, but certainly I think it's been flagged up, and I think we should look at it. And I think if there could be some way of telling existing councillors what's available to them, and if we can look at reviewing allowances maybe a little earlier than we do, so that we've got it flagged up. Councillor Walker, yes, I can see your.
Oh, yeah, I was eager to stick my two pence in, I suppose. I think the point about the extent to which some of these functions are carried out by political parties, is interesting, but it's also, I think, relevant to this discussion. And I think some empathy with the position that Councillor Thomas faces herself in, who, is from one of the independent groups, and there is a trend locally and nationally towards increased representation for independent groups on councils. Therefore, those types of groups don't tend to have the support function, which I take Councillor Plant's point about everything being left to the last minute. It's no different on our side of the aisle, I can assure you. But so I think that's interesting in and of itself. But we then get into questions about the extent to which the council could or should be providing those functions that the political parties do outside of that. I don't necessarily have a specific view to put forward about that, but I'll just voice that as something that I think is relevant. I must say, this group, the item starts with the money in the council, and then sort of goes on a couple of tangents lower down. But I've asked dozens of people to be councillors at parish borough level in the last 4 years. I don't think one of them has ever said to me they're not doing it because the money isn't enough. People don't do it because they think the time commitment is too high. And I'm not sure we could get away. I'm not sure we could get away from that. And I have absolutely no doubt that if we did put some time and effort into scrutinising this, that the outcome would be that would be the reason why people don't want to do it. Third thing I would say, at parish level, I definitely agree that there appears to me to be recruitment issues there, where not everywhere, but in my experience and my understanding, most of the parishes aren't party political. So perhaps there is more that the council could and should do to support the parishes with their recruitment. The last thing is to sort of say just about the report. The conclusion of the report here is somebody's assessed this issue as already being addressed and capable of being dealt with an alternative issue, and not consider appropriate matter of scrutiny. There's no flesh on those particular bones. So I'd be interested to hear how those conclusions have been reached before taking a final view.
I agree with what you were saying about in trying to recruit people, because I, like you, have been trying. And yes, I haven't actually come up with anybody saying it's because of couldn't afford it. It has always been a time issue, but also, unfortunately, there is the level of social media scrutiny that people are subjected to, and there are a lot of people who are saying, oh, wouldn't go near it. And I think that is actually working against us. Whilst ever it's supposed to be greater communication, I'm not quite sure it's actually achieving what it probably ought to be doing. Councillor Williams.
I can understand the sentiment behind it with trying to increase diversity and to give a more diverse pool of councillors on the council with different backgrounds, different and ideas and ways we can do. But I can also understand where it is a little bit of parties and groups explaining what the role ultimately entails. But I do remember with the members' development leading up to the election that there was a lot done around kind of pieces and recruitment for councillors and outlining what the actual job and the role entails. And I see it kind of as the ultimate job interview, that your kind of panel that you go and sit is the voter and go out and they will look at who their candidates are. And it is part of putting people for parties to put a candidate up there and to recruit, but it is that we do get some allowances in order to fulfill what we do, but we've got to be mindful that that is also taxpayers' kind of money, and where this would come from in order to try and support them, kind of how big a budget would you put for this, and then also how much kind of is there a need there for this of so many people going, well, if I did, I don't know if groups and the council have had a lot of people say that I would have done, but I can't. And like it's been outlined, it's people's time really, and that's what I've encountered with speaking to people. They're not kind of necessarily gone with how much does it pay or anything like that. It's more of I just don't have the time to give, not just for meetings, but just going and speaking to residents, meeting them, emails, all the day-to-day kind of stuff. But also one bit on this, the bottom where about the town and parish council, again, I don't think that, because they are kind of a parish and they're not going to have any resource to offer, like for people with child care needs and stuff like that. And there is just seen to be a bit, but there's organisations like NCAT that could that have been looking at this kind of thing for parishes and what they can do to help parishes in recruitment and to go out there. And it's only so much that you can try and get people to stand. And I don't think that Rushcliffe is the only council in the whole country that's got this issue either. And our expenses are all deemed by councils, but also with where we are and how we operate and the geography as well, with travel and such like, and like that with meetings and the way we operate. So I can understand, but like that, I'm kind of on how scrutiny can look at it and come in where it's only certain areas. I don't know if there's something where it's kind of what we actually do and just look at that or ask those kind of questions. I'm very torn what can actually be looked at for scrutiny, where one of the main things for scrutiny groups is kind of the policy and strategy in that.
I agree with you, Councillor Williams. I can't quite see how scrutiny is going to achieve anything. What I do think is that maybe I have asked if we could do something with regard to informing our existing councillors, and then we pass that on to other councillors, what expenses and what there is available. And in terms of councillor diversity, that could be dealt with in the report on the annual diversity report. That could be linked into that. But as to the other issue, I think we've probably all got to talk to our own groups and see if we can come up with a solution to that one, and then maybe discuss it. Councillor Plant.
I do think there's some questions to be asked, but I mean, the one obvious thing is in terms of Rushcliffe reports. Now, take it that we're in opposition, obviously, but Rushcliffe reports is full of photographs of the Conservatives, really, who are in power. Members. Cabinet, yes, yeah. And it would be, well, it seems to me more or less, let's not split hairs. That could be used much more as, not to portray us who are is in our political role, but in terms of how, how we've got obviously young members that could actually be featured, and how do you fit it in and things like that with your job. We've got ethnic minorities that are there, and how what they found, and how it obviously supports and helps their community and things like that. I mean, there are sort of things that I do read that, and I do actually know people who are not political that read that magazine. It is well put together, it's informative, and I think it could be used much more to promote the role of the councillor, irrespective of the part of their political party, and how they respond and actually do the job. And it would be of use to future.
It's unfortunate that Councillor Palmer has actually left, because perhaps you could pass that information on to him, and perhaps we can look at trying to diversify a little more in terms of the photographs. But it is difficult when it is a cabinet member. There's not a lot you can do. The cabinet member is who the cabinet member is. Councillor Williams.
Maybe this isn't something necessarily for a scrutiny group, but potentially member development, that if there's some kind of way that might look at this kind of issue, because we looked at the document and all that, and the publication with not recruit, but what it entails to become a councillor, and that went at the end. But kind of, if there's something around that could be looked at, and potentially I feel that might be the best group within council, that even though it's not a scrutiny in the title, but it's more fits into that, I think, remit.
Perhaps it could be mentioned to the member of development group. Do you indicate?
I was just going to say that a series of articles in Rushcliffe Reports and on social media from new councillors and their experiences settling into the role, in the same way as you do it just in the run-up to the election. You talk about, what the job is. There's quite a good opportunity now with new councillors to share their experiences.
I actually thought we put out a publication, didn't we, about becoming a councillor, and there were little scenarios from a whole raft of councillors across the board.
Well, I think a whole raft would be perhaps over-egging it, because I'm aware that one of the issues that the officers have is that as asking us all, will we do it, and no one does. So I think we ought to look at ourselves. It's not necessarily all good saying officers should do this, officers should do that, officers should do the other, because I'm going to defend them on this one and say we haven't held up under the bargain. Sorry to be a bit of a pain, but I'm still waiting for an answer as to what the alternative way of dealing with the issue is that's been proposed, or how the issue is already being addressed.
Well, it's not so much how we can deal with it, because I don't think we know how we can deal with it. But
that's what the officer feedback on the item says.
Yes. Where did they?
So what is it?
Yes. How did they?
What is the alternative way of dealing with
it? And Charlotte's making.
I'm quite happy to jump in at any point and explain. Obviously, I put these reports together. Just before I get onto that point, I would like to say that Councillor Thomas brought this forward, and I have to say, personally, I would love to be inundated with enthusiastic prospective councillors. I would feel a great joy, like the Reddy Breckman with his red bit around it, but we simply don't get it. And as she pointed out in her presentation of the matrix, we do an awful lot of work in the run up to a borough council election. We have a Become a Councillor guide, we do a social media campaign, and as Councillor Williams said, that was all done with the assistance of member development group. And as Councillor Walker said, yes, it's like pulling teeth trying to get current councillors to put their experiences forward and participate in that. There is a limit to how much the borough council can do at that point of time, although I do take on board the comments that actually if we did it a bit earlier, maybe there would be more time for the big political groups, for example, to use that material and to help them with their recruitment. I'll also take on board the comments about the IRP. If we did that, the independent remuneration panel, if that was brought forward, perhaps there would be an opportunity for you to engage more in depth. But again, that's another opportunity for you to participate. And we had 5, maybe 6 people come forward with their views. So I'm putting it back on your door.
Absolutely.
It is incumbent on you to engage in these things. It cannot all be down to officers. We're not sitting in your shoes. It would be, well, it wouldn't be real. It would be dishonest for us to say this is what it's like being a councillor because we don't know. If I move on to the awareness of expenses and allowances, without teaching anybody to suck eggs, Part 6 of the Constitution it's a 12-page part of the Constitution. It outlines your allowances and any expenses that you can claim. It's covered in the induction. It's on the councillor's portal. It's there.
I have to say,
I'm not quite sure what else I can do. And yes, of course, we'll put something in Councillors Connection to bring that to people's attention. And of course, at September Council, you will all be given a piece of paper that says, I have signed to say I have read the Constitution, which includes Part 6. So hopefully people will then find out what it is they're entitled to claim. I did want to just update you slightly on some work that I had a meeting about yesterday, actually, which is what we're planning to do for Democracy Week, which is in October of this year, which is very much concentrating on facts and figures, a social media campaign about our councillors, what decisions they make, the work that they do out in the community and their role of the councillors, how many people we have registering to vote, making sure people have got their idea. So an awful lot of work we will focus on during that week. And again, we will be using those video snippets about what's it really like and what difference can you make being a councillor. We'll use those again, and we will continue to do that kind of thing moving forward. One of the reasons that I have completed the matrix the way I have, as far as I'm concerned, expenses and allowances are dealt with by the IRP. So that's an alternative way that they are dealt with. That is the proper method for doing that. That's a statutory requirement. The recruitment work, the awareness raising that we do as a borough council, we do through member development group. And I think that is the correct place for that to be done. There is nothing stopping us, and I actually have a member development group later this month. There is absolutely nothing to stop us put this on the agenda earlier than we would normally would, and seeing if there's anything more that we can do to raise awareness for diversity and recruitment. Also, if you have a look at the terms of reference for each of your scrutiny groups, I think we would all be hard pushed to find out where this would sit if you took it forward to scrutiny. And personally speaking, if I was a member of the community rather than an officer of a council, I would be sitting here saying, you're all navel gazing. You're asking yourselves, am I getting the right amount of money and can I get any more? And whilst I know that isn't why you put it forward, and it isn't the motivation that most people bring, unfortunately, to a member of the public, that would be the perception. So I think there are better ways that we can deal with the issues that you've raised, Councillor Thomas, but I do thank you for bringing them forward.
Yes. I think what I have to say is, yes, I hear what you say about item 6 of the Constitution. Yes, I think for new members, though, they are bombarded with information very early on, and you are a little bit of a rabbit in the headlights. And do you take it all on board? No, you don't. And it's only as you start to experience things do you start then to ask questions. So maybe a little reminder would be helpful. And I hear what Councillor Walker was saying and what you're saying in terms of the people trying to draw teeth to get people to come forward to give their little scenario about their experience. That it is a nightmare. And I'm afraid to say it's always the usual suspects. Like yourself, Councillor Thomas, you'll be there, you'll do it. But it's getting others to do it. And getting, I mean, you are very driven. Your scrutiny is amazing, but finding other people like that is very difficult. And how we get around that, I have no idea. But I think we've put some ideas in place, and I'm sure it's all food for thought for all of us. So thank you very much, Councillor Ray.
Can I just take it back to the origins of this? That was about encouraging people to become councillors, and all the stuff that Charlotte's just said about everything being in the Constitution. I can't think of anybody who reads the Constitution before they become a councillor. So it's about getting that information out to the general arena to encourage people to join in advance.
Do you think the Constitution would actually encourage anyone to do
No, it's absolutely. Do you know, I read it on the plane when I was going on holiday.
Oh dear.
No, I've only read part of it. I have to say that my iPad wouldn't work on the way home, so I've got to part 6. But I think the information needs to be out there. I have to say, when I became a councillor, it was an immense surprise to me that I got an allowance. That's not the reason why I did it. And you're right, yes. I think a lot of people do that. But if we want to encourage a more diverse cohort on the council, and somebody mentioned younger people, they've got to have babysitters for whom they've got to pay. They've got to come out in the evening where maybe if their child was in bed and they had a computer, they could join in. That would ease things a huge amount. So it's about thinking round the topic. The diversity of our council is not really diverse when it said the majority of people on the council are over 65. That's horrendous, really. We need the younger ones coming in and learning the system, while the older, I say that because I'm one of them, the older people have got the experience to pass on at that point.
It ever was thus.
Exactly.
Same with volunteer groups.
Well, exactly. And we need to, I haven't got the answer, but we need to try, I think is the thing. We need to try and maybe get some of this information out in advance. And I think the run up to the election is almost too late, because people need time to talk, to mull it over, think it out, chat to various people about the pros and cons. So we need to be doing this throughout our term in some way or another. And I don't think it's right just to leave it to party politics. As you know, I don't have any party politics, but I do my best to persuade people to think about coming forward. And a lot of people think they can't do it if they're not a member of a political party. So somehow we need to get that out there as well.
Well, it's education again, isn't it? Maybe we need to start in school. Anyway, I think we'd better move on. We have still got quite a bit to get through. Right, we'll go back to the beginning. I think we have a scrutiny item which has come forward from Services Manager for Public Protection, Jeff Carpenter, and this is the smoke control areas in the borough.
I think I might regret this, but I'm going to do it anyway. In light of the fact that all of these have been brought forward by officers, they're all recommended for to being taken forward to scrutiny. Can we not consider them on a slate? And unless we've read the papers, Does anybody think that any of them shouldn't go forward to scrutiny?
Well, okay, we'll do them en masse, but yes, I was going to gallop through them. Is anybody against any of them? But what I would say, does anybody want to add anything to what you've read? Do you think, oh, but they should? Sorry?
To the existing
Yes.
proposals.
Think things like gas cannons at the cricket ground. I jest. Councillor Way.
Isn't the review of growth boards already on the scrutiny programme, growth and development?
Sorry.
The review of growth boards is already on the scrutiny agenda, isn't it?
We've already got them in the work.
They're already on the work programme as provisional items. The reason that the growth board one seems more familiar is because it's come through as a cabinet recommendation. But it's still important
Yes.
that you have a look at the matrix and say, yes, this actually comes through.
Yes. Exactly.
Chair, if I might, just while
We
I've
need
got
a
the
vote on each one anyway.
yeah, just one that's come through today. It's been brought to my attention that the governance work programme is missing a report on RIPA, which is the Regulation of Investigatory Powers, which we're hoping to bring forward in November. So I would just like to put that one back. It's
Back into
fallen
the-
off your work programme, apparently.
Okay. Right. So if I can just go through each one by saying, yes, the first item is the one from Jeff Carpenter on smoke control. Are we all in agreement with that going forward? Yes. Councillor Plant, can you put your...
Sorry.
Thank you.
The smoke control areas and in relation to the sale of certain solid fuels. Does that include wood burners? Oh, good.
The second item is the one brought forward by Catherine Evans, Service Manager, Economic Growth and Property, review of the growth boards. Any objections to that one? No. Service Manager, Neighbourhoods, use of community facilities. I think it's very important we have this one. It's already come up. And in fact, I just wanted to say, I just wondered if, because this isn't coming up until, when is it? June 24. The way we use community facilities is changing continually because the way we socialise is changing continually and what people want from community facilities is changing. And I just wondered if we should try screening films in the community facilities in the halls, just to see if you attract anybody. As a trial, I'm not suggesting that, yes, we do it every week, every month, but whatever is considered would be a trial, and do it in probably one of the halls just to see what is attractive. So I thought this gave you a chance to try things out. Right, so that said that. And we've done our review of Canal and Rivers Trust. This, of course, is coming back because of the agreement, the service level agreement, which was asked for. Anybody, any objections? Nope, that needs to come forward. So that's absolutely great. Can I at this point ask, does anybody have anything that they would like to bring forward for scrutiny? No? Well, I am concerned about connectivity, mobile connectivity and broadband, particularly in the rural areas. I don't know whether you rural councillors have any NOT spots, but we have mega NOT spots in my ward, and in fact 2 of my parishes have joined together and are putting in for this BD UK bid for broadband, and it looks as though they're going to get that. But I personally feel we should be scrutinising it. It's not heavens. We're in 2023 here. Why can't we get 100% connectivity? It's not good enough to say we've got 93%. What about that 7% who haven't got it? So I think it needs to be scrutinised. I think it was scrutinised years ago, and I think it's time it was scrutinised again, because I don't think we actually fulfilled what our objective at that time. So I'm going to propose that, and I will, if required, I'll put a matrix in. Has anybody anything they'd like to say on that, or anything they'd like to put forward? Councillor Walker.
It's whether if it's a borough issue or not.
What's that?
Broadband and connectivity.
You're not sure it's a borough issue?
Council.
Oh, I see what you mean. I understand what you're saying. Yes, possibly. County again, the county can get involved in it, but they don't actually, because if there are not spots, they offer you these vouchers to go off and then find another supplier. And the other question is, do we have the mobile masts in our area? Well, maybe a mobile mast.
I think it's a valid point and something to be scrutinised. I think it'll be like with the matrix of what it is, because you're touching on like growth and development planning. So potentially like where masts could be and go, and if there is anything in the local plan for those, that type of thing, etc. So I think, yeah, it'd be interesting to see kind of what kind of a matrix or what could be done with officers and how it could be looked at, borough, like when I say borough wide, not geographically, but as an organisation.
I've already been approached by, well, a resident in one of my wards has been approached by a company. Obviously, they do a fishing exercise looking for sites that would be suitable for mobile masts and where there are not spots. And she contacted me because she was a little uncertain of who the people were and what they were and what it was all about. So I've been in touch with this company. I know what they do and how it works, and I'm happy to feed that in. But anyway, I will put in a matrix, and like everybody else, it will be subject to your discussion. Right. So I think we now go to the work programmes themselves, and you're telling me that the corporate overview of work programme is mainly rolling items, but the government's one needs something putting into it, or putting back into it.
Yes, a report on RIPA in November.
November.
I look forward to it.
Sorry?
I look forward to it.
Right. Growth and development. We have a new one in there for the review of the crematorium. And that's next year, following the outcome of recommendations this year. All right. Who's growth and
A team over here.
right, the 80. And communities, you're smoking. And you've got the Canal and Rivers Trust coming up, and these are both coming up. That's a full,
Yeah.
that is
I
very
was
full.
going to interject at that point. Both the Canals and Rivers Trust and the smoke control areas are time sensitive. The Canals and Rivers Trust because of the budget setting process, and the smoke control areas because of new legislation. social housing models was already in there and has been in there for a while, but I was going to recommend that we move that forward to January, just so that you're not overwhelming one meeting and then having a quiet one the following time round.
Can I just say something? We are seeing this quite late on, that these two items, which are time sensitive, which we must have been aware of for the last 4 years.
I've already had that argument internally, don't worry.
We should be actually pushing them into the timetable long before this. Okay. Councillor Williams.
On that, at our last community scrutiny group, it was felt by the group that potentially flight pass in January could be a bit of a meaty item, and because of having potentially representatives from East Midlands Airport, that they could get quite scrutinised on their proposal and that. So a lot of members did say about keeping that as the only item in January as well. So I'm a little bit cautious of kind of putting something in as well. Unless there's something around Canal and River Trust that we could have a briefing or what, and I'm quite happy to have alongside with Councillor Plant discussion with officers on what could we do to cater if we to have all three on that agenda and around in order to make them fit anything before the actual meeting and like briefing documents, etc. That type of thing, or even one representative asking questions from the Canal and River Trust, as that was my first meeting chairing, and got overrun a little by answers.
Yeah, look, not be my place to say, but look, 3-hour meeting, and in an hour's a long time to be discussing something, and in my experience, it's the initial presentations that can kill. Sorry, that can eat into a lot of that time. Somebody's presenting for 20-25 minutes. And I will say, not uncommonly rehashing the report that everybody should have read in advance of the meeting. Then, with good recommendations, a good report, and then a brief presentation, 45-50 minutes, ought to be enough time to discuss this, to cover something. And I would also say, particularly with colleagues, where we ought to be asking questions, not verging on giving speeches and pontificating for 5 minutes as well. So if we club together on all of those things, I see no reason why that there couldn't be 3 decent sized items on an agenda for a 3-hour meeting.
I have to say, I've said for a long time that officer reports ought to be, you have the report before you, you will have read that, do you have any questions? And they shouldn't really need to do any more than that. But I don't know. It would be for you to have that discussion with officers as to whether that could actually work. I personally think you've probably they're quite meaty items. I think you'll be wanting to not pontificate, but you'll be wanting to question.
May I put forward another idea, which would be to start the meeting earlier and then perhaps have a break. If you are keen on keeping all 3, that's something you can discuss with your lead officer. We've done that with governance before, when the agenda has looked particularly long. What tends to happen in practice is that you then finish quite early. It's difficult to know how things are going to go. The other recommendation I would make is actually working with your group in advance to say, the reports are out, here are the 3 items, we've got to cover the 3 in the meetings, right, what questions are we all interested in answering, and having that discussion beforehand so that you can say, these are the important ones, these ones we can find out and answer another way, perhaps in advance of the meeting and such like, and allocating them round. So almost like you are stage managing that discussion to keep a better control over what's happening in that time slot.
Brief now. So why are those 2 time sensitive?
Councillor Clark, could you?
Oh,
They're time sensitive. The Canals and River Trust, this is about us deciding whether we give them a grant of money to do work on our behalf, whether we financially support them over the coming years. So that's obviously tied into the budget setting process, which is why that one goes forward at that point. And the smoke control areas, we have a legislative requirement to introduce new policy. I think it's going to December Council, because I think it's got to be in place for January next year.
Right, are you happy then that you're going to have a discussion with your lead officers? And you'll notify us as to what you're proposing to do. Is that all right? Right, okay. So I think that brings us to the end of that item. Feedback is now from me. I think I have said all I need to say. I don't need to pontificate. Councillor Walker will be pleased. And what about you, Charlotte?
I just wanted to cover a few things. Councillor Thomas, who's still with us this evening, sent us through a couple of suggestions that Councillor Cumberlack and I have discussed prior to this meeting. So I just wanted to cover off a few things, and these are about continuing to improve scrutiny and the way that we do things. Obviously, Councillor Thomas has been here this evening. We've got this 5-minute slot, which would allow people who have put a matrix forward to come and speak. That's happened a few times now. I certainly feel it adds to the debate. It certainly helps people get their point of view across. So the intention would be to continue that. I just wanted to remind you that should you want somebody who's put a matrix forward to come and do that at your meetings, the same 5-minute slot is available and you can invite them to do that. What there is not a provision for in the Constitution is for them then to participate in that debate as a member of that scrutiny group, because of course they are not, but they can certainly come and say, this is why I feel that you should be talking about it this evening. In terms of raising the group's awareness of what those matrices have got on them, that we agree here, 2 things. One, when you put your when officers put your work programs together, we will put an electronic link in to our reports so that you can see what the matrix has asked for to be scrutinised. And we'll also make sure that a copy of that matrix is Appendix 1 of any officer reports coming forward. And hopefully that will also keep them closer to account in terms of meeting the requirements that the matrix has put forward as their key lines of inquiry. So those are things that we'll start doing now over the next cycle of meetings. I did also want to point out that the Section 106 and SIL training is on the 11th of October. I've checked that. And at Council at the end of this month, for those chairmen who are continuing from their positions last year, we've changed the format of the annual reports of scrutiny to make them much more outcomes focused. So we are looking at the impact of having done the scrutiny rather than just rehashing the minutes. What's been interesting while we've been writing those reports up, and hopefully when the council papers get published, you'll be able to see, is that sometimes there isn't a great deal of impact to the scrutiny that we're doing. So I'm hoping that it will help us become more focused on that through the work that you're doing with your groups. So we'd be interested in any feedback that you had on those later in the month.
That'd be good. Councillor Williams.
Could I just, I think it's great, I think, by putting the matrices on for the items for each of the agenda. But of course, when we have our chair briefings, we won't get that. And sometimes some of these, like social, have been on for a bit, and trying to remember which cog it was in. Could they be included just to kind of remind for what when doing the chair's briefing as well. Thank you.
Right, so that leaves us to item 9, the corporate strategy, which the last one we had, I personally felt was very good. I liked the format of it, the way it was structured. I believe this one will be presented in the same manner. Has anybody any comments? Councillor Plant?
I just, I suppose, well, I know from the county actually that you never get huge responses. 352, is that sort of an average response? Was it any more than the last 4 years ago, or whatever is it?
This is actually the first time we've done public consultation on the corporate strategy, so we have no benchmarking figures to come back to you with.
So it's good.
Well, that was a searching question anyway. Anybody else have anything they wish to say? Because we have been asked to consider the report and the draft actions, and request that the final draft goes to be brought before the Corporate Overview Group in November for endorsement. So are we happy it goes in its draft format? Yes. Can I have somebody propose? Thank you, Councillor Williams, seconded by Councillor Edley. And that, I think, brings us to the end of our meeting. Thank you all very much. All the questions were good and searching, and I think we've actually, yes, I think there was some interesting material there.